Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Schneider. I'm the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, and we are here today because we are announcing federal charges against former UAW President Gary Jones. The United States of America is charging Mr. Jones with one count of conspiracy to embezzle union funds and conspiracy to aid racketeering activity, and one count of conspiracy to defraud the United States by failing to pay taxes on over $1 million that he and his cohorts stole from the UAW. Over the last 10 years, since 2010, Gary Jones has served as the Assistant Director of UAW Region 5. He's also served as the Director of Region 5, and ultimately as the President of the UAW. The allegations are that in connection with his UAW roles, Mr. Jones conspired with other UAW officials to steal over $1 million in UAW money and property. Instead of that cash and property going to help the men and women of the union, Mr. Jones spent it on his own personal enjoyment and on the whims of other high-ranking union officials. Mr. Jones, together with UAW officials Vance Pearson and Edward Robinson, spent UAW money on items that the workers of the union could scarcely afford. These improper expenses were completely unrelated to union business, such as luxury condos and villas in California, lavish dinners at expensive restaurants, premium liquor, 5 sets of custom-made golf clubs specially designed by a golf pro, horseback riding on the beach, over $100,000 in golf green fees, golf clothing, sunglasses, and tips for caddies, over $60,000 in high-end cigars, humidors, and cigar paraphernalia, over $8,000 in spa treatments for UAW officials and their spouses, and much more. Mr. Jones and his cohorts covered up their scheme through fake vouchers and false receipts. They repeatedly lied to the UAW accounting staff by disguising their luxuries as payments to outside vendors or meals for UAW officials. Those lies tricked the UAW into filing false tax returns to the IRS. Gary Jones is the 14th defendant charged in our investigation of the UAW and the Joint Training Centers, and this investigation is ongoing. We are not done, and we cannot predict exactly when we will be done. But I am pleased to say that today we are another step closer to ridding the UAW of its corrupt leadership and returning the union to the hard-working men and women who work there. I'm joined today by our law enforcement partners, FBI Special Agent in Charge Steve D'Antuono, IRS Criminal Investigations Special Agent in Charge Sarah Cull, Thomas Murray, the District Director for the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Labor Management Standards, and James Mead, Assistant Special Agent in Charge of the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Inspector General. I'm very thankful to the IRS, to the FBI, and to the Labor Department special agents who have worked tirelessly to put this case together. And I'm especially honored to work with Assistant U.S. Attorneys David Gardy and Steve Karras, who are standing behind me. They have worked long hours away from their families, and they have worked tirelessly to make this case a success, and we are grateful. We're grateful to them and very thankful. Finally, I must note that the charges that I have discussed here and that my law enforcement partners are about to discuss are only allegations. Gary Jones is innocent until proven guilty. Nick Robinson and Vance Pearson have already pleaded guilty. I'm going to turn this over now to Special Agent in Charge D'Antuono.
Thank you, Matthew. So as Matthew stated, my name is Stephen D'Antuono. I'm the Special Agent in Charge for the FBI here in Detroit, Michigan, for the state of Michigan. We stand before you today because of greed, the pure and simple greed of several men in positions of power. Today is the 14th time criminal charges have been filed against an individual as part of this investigation. It is also the 14th time we all have been asked to come up with words to express our collective disgust at the illegal conduct of automotive executives and union officials. and it is the 14th time the public has been given a glimpse into the systematic corruption inside this union. The charges against Gary Jones are offensive to the hardworking men and women of the UAW, and they are offensive to those of us who believe in the important contribution unions make to the livelihood of their members. My father and many of my relatives were members of a union. Consequently, I understand their importance. So when I became the special agent in charge of the FBI in Michigan 6 months ago, I specifically asked for this briefing on the UAW case. I asked for the briefing because of the integral part this union has played in Michigan's industrial and economic development. Detroit is known as the Motor City due at least in part to the success of the UAW. Has had in advocating for its workers and keeping automotive jobs here. I was, and I remain impressed by the methodical way in which this case has been investigated and prosecuted. I am incredibly proud of the tireless work the agents, the analysts, professional staff, and the prosecutors have put into this investigation. I was and remain appalled by the UAW officials who used the union coffers to fund a lavish lifestyle. That money, which was entrusted to them by loyal, dues-paying members, should have been used to improve training opportunities, or healthcare options, or increase retirement, or legal defense funds. The UAW membership deserves better. Corruption, big or small, erodes public confidence and weakens the strength of our institutions and our republic. While union corruption is not new, each instance slowly undermines the trust members have in the organization. In order for unions to be effective, their members must trust their leadership to do what is best for the entire union, and not just for themselves. In this case, the trust has been broken over and over again. The FBI remains steadfast in its determination to root out corruption at all levels and to help restore the integrity of our institutions. We cannot do it alone. Many of our investigations start with a tip from someone who suspects corruption, and we are always grateful to those who come forward with those tips. If you have information, please call our office or submit a tip to tips.fbi.gov. While today represents a significant development in this investigation, it doesn't represent its end. Our work on this case will continue until we are satisfied that everyone who should answer for these crimes is brought to justice. I thank my law enforcement partners behind me, the IRS, the Department of Labor, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Cull, and I'm the Special Agent in charge of the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation for the Detroit Field Office. On behalf of the IRS Criminal Investigation, I'd like to thank all of our partners from the Department of Labor, the FBI, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for their support and cooperation throughout this investigation. Gary Jones and other high-ranking UAW officials created a culture of corruption and greed, which became regular practice throughout the UAW for over a decade. The behavior of Mr. Jones and other current and former UAW officials is inexcusable and served one purpose: self-enrichment. IRS Criminal Investigation, along with our partners, worked diligently to rid the UAW of the culture of corruption that was created by Mr. Jones and others. The hardworking men and women of the UAW deserves a leadership team it can trust, a leadership team that will use the UAW's resources to further its members' interests and well-being, not on lavish vacations for a select few. Today's charges remind us that the Internal Revenue Code is clear. Income derived from any source, including funds diverted from the UAW and cash embezzled from the UAW's cap councils, is subject to income tax. IRS Criminal Investigation Special Agents specialize in financial investigations and each day work diligently to follow the money. IRS Criminal Investigation directs its efforts at prosecuting individuals who willfully and intentionally violate the tax laws and commit financial crimes against the United States government. This information charges Gary Jones of not only committing crimes against the American taxpayers, but also against the very people he was elected to serve, the men and women of the UAW. All Americans have a duty to pay their fair share of taxes, and the IRS criminal investigation ensures that all Americans, including high-ranking union officials, are held to that same standard. IRS criminal investigation will continue to play a critical role in public corruption and corporate fraud investigations. Our agents are committed to following the money trail and pursuing the evidence wherever it leads, leaving no financial stone unturned. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Murray. I am the District Director for the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Labor Management Standards, Detroit-Milwaukee District Office. The passage of the Landrum-Griffin Act in 1959 made it a federal crime for union officers and employees to embezzle union funds. It has been the Office of Labor Management Standards' primary mission to protect the financial integrity of labor unions. Today's information details former UAW President Gary Jones's involvement in a multifaceted scheme to embezzle more than $1 million of union funds in order to provide a lavish lifestyle for himself and others. Mr. Jones had a duty under the law to hold the union's money and property solely for the benefit of the union and its members, and his action violated the trust that the hardworking members of the UAW placed in him. I would like to thank the U.S. Attorney's Office, along with my fellow law enforcement partners, for their continuing hard work in eliminating the corruption within the UAW International Union. Thank you.
We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Schneider, we continue to see other UAW officials noted as letters B, C, D, and E. When might we expect to find out who these other co-conspirators are?
The investigation is ongoing, and sometimes it takes time in federal investigations. The wheels of justice moved correctly. The wheels of justice move appropriately, but sometimes they do not move as swiftly as you might like, and we are trying to move as quickly as we possibly can.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Does the racketeering charge indicate that maybe the government at some point may be considering taking over the United Auto Workers?
Well, that's always an option. It's one of the options, and we've said that from the very beginning, whether or not federal government oversight of the UAW is necessary. And I would like to point out your attention, there was an article recently when James Hoffa from the Teamsters had an opportunity to talk about government oversight of the Teamsters Union. And what he indicated was that it has been overall a positive thing because they have had direct democracy, direct elections of their officers, and that has worked well for the Teamsters. I think that's something that we should all pay attention to. It could possibly be a good model here, but we cannot address that. It would be premature to go further into that because we're not done with these criminal cases. Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you talk about where Gary Jones is now? Has he turned himself in? Is he going to turn himself in? What is the status, and when will he be reported?
We've had productive discussions with Mr. Jones's attorney, and we have a cooperative relationship in those discussions. It remains to be seen whether or not he will plead guilty or not. That is, of course, entirely his decision. It's up to him. You know that we filed an information in this case, so typically when we file informations, oftentimes that means there is a guilty plea. We will wait and see.
Do you expect him to cooperate?
We will wait and see. Yes.
Matthew, a few months ago you said you weren't satisfied with the level of cooperation the UAW was providing. Has that changed at all, and could you comment on their level of cooperation now?
I did say that, and I have that same position. We could always use additional cooperation from the UAW. We have always wanted that. We've asked that. When we ask any American if you are aware of crimes, we expect and hope that you will report that to the FBI, to the Department of Labor, to the IRS, to law enforcement. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know if there's other information out there, but I can tell you this. We expect additional cooperation that we haven't gotten yet so far. Yes, sir.
On the acronyms, now that he's been charged, can you identify Gary Jones as official A in previous informations and charging documents?
No? Yes.
There have been differing buckets in this overarching investigation. Are there other areas that we have not seen yet that are still either under investigation or likely to bear fruit?
It's an excellent question, and I wish I could elaborate. I can tell you that we've had an ongoing investigation that has really touched on all the auto companies, and it's been pretty comprehensive. It's difficult for us to explain exactly what else is out there because we are still receiving tips from the public. We are still receiving information from UAW members, people who were working in line, working in the jobs of the UAW. They're still sending us information, and so it takes us a little bit of time to follow up on that. Yes?
The UAW continues to be adamant that Rory Gamble has nothing to do with this, even in their statement that they released to us today. Is he a part of your focus?
Our focus is on any corrupt activities within the UAW. It doesn't matter who is operating in it. It doesn't matter who's doing it. If there are corrupt activities in the UAW, we're focused on it.
Is he one of the people involved in that?
As I said, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's him or not. We're not going to be able to comment on who our targets are, who our investigation is focusing on. And my partner in the FBI and I, that's a pretty consistent statement for us in any investigation. No other questions? Well, we will stick around afterward if you do have some questions that you didn't want to ask in front of the larger pool. Thank you very much.